Thanks for watching Endgame Economics. If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe. It's completely free for you, and it helps us continue making more videos like this.
All right, let's dive straight into this explainer and unpack a massive $10 billion bet being made by a country that is standing right on the edge of an economic cliff. We're looking at Uganda today. This is a nation that has set itself up for what could be one of the most audacious financial transformations of the 21st century. It's a story of absolutely incredible ambition, but as you'll see, it is also one of really deep contradictions.
So check out this number, because it's pretty wild. In the final quarter of 2025, Uganda's economy actually grew faster than China. It grew faster than India, and frankly, faster than almost any major economy on Earth. It hit a completely astounding 8.5% growth rate. If you're just looking at standard macroeconomic metrics, this looks like a country that is literally rocketing into the future. They've got a fiercely strong currency and beautifully managed inflation.
But here's the massive paradox. Despite that skyrocketing economic climb, over half the country is still trapped below the international poverty line. We're talking 51.5% of Ugandans living on less than $2.15 a day. When you put those two realities side by side, you'd honestly wonder if you were looking at two completely different countries. And that massive disconnect, that sets up the whole mystery we're investigating today. How exactly can a nation be one of the fastest growing economies on the planet and yet still be one of the poorest? Part 1. The real economy, coffee, bodas, and the hustle. To figure this mystery out, we've got to get off those lofty GDP charts and drop right down to street level to see what actually employs the masses in Uganda. And what we find is essentially an unfinished economic transformation. Get this, 3 out of 4 working Ugandans, that's 72% of the labor force, are growing food by hand. Yet, they only generate 24% of the country's wealth. Meanwhile, that remaining 28% of the workforce, the folks in services, industry, and government, they produce a staggering 76% of the economic output. That huge gap in productivity is exactly where Uganda's poverty lives. To really understand that agricultural struggle, all we have to do is look at coffee. Uganda is Africa's second largest coffee producer, and honestly, a literal genetic goldmine for the Robusta bean. But the actual money in the coffee game, that's being made by international roasters, branders, and retailers in places like Seattle and Tokyo. The vast majority of Uganda's export leaves the country as low-margin, raw, unroasted green beans, so the local farmers are left with just a tiny, tiny sliver of that final retail pie. There's this brilliant analogy from the source material that hits the nail on the head. Think about it like this. If your $5 cup of coffee was a pizza, the Ugandan farmer's slice is just that little dusting of Parmesan they shake on top at the very end. It just shows exactly why relying on raw exports hasn't lifted rural farmers out of poverty. Yields in Uganda are roughly half of what you'd see on modern commercial farms in, say, Brazil. And it's not because the soil is bad. The soil is incredibly fertile. It's just because there's limited adoption of fertilizer, irrigation, and mechanization. They simply aren't capturing the value.
And the pressure to create real wealth is mounting super fast, because an astonishing 77% of Uganda's population is under the age of 30. They have the second youngest median age on Earth, sitting right around 16.7 years old. This is bringing massive waves of youth into a formal job market that right now barely even exists. The formal manufacturing and service sectors just cannot generate jobs fast enough to catch them all.
So what do these youths do? They turn to the informal hustle. We're talking about the street market vendors, the SIM card hawkers, and the crazy non-Newtonian traffic of boda motorcycle taxis that absorb vast amounts of young labor. And this massive informal sector actually masks an official unemployment rate that looks artificially low. It sits under 4%, because almost everyone is technically hustling for a few hours a week, even if it's literally just for pennies. Which brings us to part 2, the $10 billion bet, pumping black gold. To fix this massive systemic issue, the government is placing a structural bet on a confirmed 1.7 billion barrels of recoverable crude oil sitting right beneath the Albertine Rift Valley. Getting this oil out of the ground and to the global market relies on 3 highly ambitious mega projects. You've got the Talanga Fields, the Kingfisher Field, and then the real showpiece, EACOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. Because Ugandan crude is highly waxy, it turns into something like cold, thick honey at room temperature. EACOP has to be a 1,400-kilometer electrically heated pipeline. It requires continuous heat across its entire journey to the Tanzanian coast just to keep the oil flowing. Now this wager forces a really dramatic trade-off. On one hand, the government makes a serious, understandable argument. Why should a developing nation be denied the right to fund its own prosperity using fossil fuels, exactly like the West already did? But on the flip side, this project displaces an estimated 100,000 people. Plus, over its 25-year life, it's expected to produce emissions that more than double the annual climate footprint of Uganda and Tanzania combined. So yeah, it's a massive, highly controversial gamble.
Section 3. The Squeeze. Politics, Aid, and Debt. Here's the catch. While waiting for this oil to actually start flowing, and it's already faced multiple delays, the country is caught in this perfect storm of political stagnation, an international aid collapse, and crippling debt. Let's look at the politics holding this all together. President Yoweri Museveni has been in power since 1986. He has outlasted 6 U.S. presidents. This 40-year centralization delivered textbook macro stability and low inflation, escaping a lot of the chaos of the past. But it's also bloated public administration through patronage networks. More importantly, it creates nervous bond markets and investors who are watching this high-risk succession question, basically wondering what happens to this highly centralized economy when he inevitably leaves.
Then, you add an external shock on top of that political uncertainty. For decades, foreign aid funded a massive portion of Uganda's health and education sectors. But following controversial domestic legislation in 2023, specifically the Anti-Homosexuality Act, and then sweeping reevaluations of U.S. foreign aid in 2025, Uganda essentially fell off a rapid aid cliff. The World Bank suspended new lending, USAID funding plummeted by 66% in a single year, and suddenly, the country was scrambling for emergency funds just to keep basic things like HIV treatment and refugee food programs operational.
Which brings us to the domestic math, and it is brutal. Compounding this aid crisis is the fact that the government only collects about 14% of its GDP in taxes. Economists will tell you 15% is basically the bare minimum threshold required to run a functioning state. To build schools, pay civil servants, keep the lights on. Uganda has been trying to govern below that minimum line. So the really crucial point is this. Because the informal economy is totally untaxed, the state has to borrow heavily just to survive. Out of every 100 shillings the government does manage to collect, roughly 32 go straight out the door just to pay interest on debt. That's money that isn't building hospitals or patching roads. And worse, as they borrow domestically at super high interest rates to cover the gap left by that lost foreign aid, they are crowding out their own private sector, basically starving small businesses of the credit they need to grow.
Section 4. The Final Gamble. The Audacity of Vision 2040.
Facing a tiny tax base, evaporating aid, and all that mounting debt, the government's official answer to escape this immense squeeze is an astonishing master plan called Vision 2040. The sheer scale of this ambition is just staggering. They are aiming to 10x their economy. They want to move from a current GDP of roughly $56.6 billion all the way to a target of $500 billion in a mere 14 years. To put that into perspective, they're trying to reach the current economic size of Belgium, but with twice the population in just over a decade.
Now, the optimistic case here, the absolute best-case scenario for this plan, is that the math on paper isn't actually impossible. If they can perfectly execute on agro-industrialization, meaning actually roasting and packaging that coffee domestically, if they can lock up the future oil revenue safely in a sovereign wealth fund rather than letting it bleed out into patronage, and if they can educate their massive youth population to harness a true demographic dividend, well, they could run growth rates that compound beautifully.
But history is full of stark warnings. The single biggest predictor of whether oil enriches a developing nation or destroys it is the quality of its institutions right before the money arrives. Nations with uneven institutions frequently suffer what's called the resource curse, where oil money just props up patronage, hollows out all the other sectors, and ultimately leaves the average citizen absolutely no better off.
So, Uganda remains a wildly fascinating contradiction. It balances this beautifully managed paper economy, complete with a central bank that runs like a Swiss watch and flashy 8.5% growth rates, right up against a really harsh street economy, characterized by a leaky tax base, crushing debt service, and millions of people still relying on subsistence farming and informal hustles just to get by.
Which leaves us with the ultimate $10 billion question as Uganda peers over the edge of this massive transition. Will the 2040 vision fundamentally transform the median citizen's life through real structural change? Or is this oil gamble simply going to displace the poor, rack up unmanageable debt, and leave the Pearl of Africa exactly where it started? It's a massive, high-stakes waiting game right now, and the next 5 years are going to write the answer.